Welcome, everybody. I'm Mark Peter Davis, managing partner of Interplay. I'm on a mission to help entrepreneurs advance society, and this podcast is definitively part of that effort. Very excited today to have Brad Svrluga, the co-founder and managing partner of Primary Ventures here in New York City, on as a guest today. Now, Brad is a special person to me. We used to work together. He is a longtime friend and has been a mentor for more than a decade. He's a great guy and very thoughtful. Now, what he's built at Primary is truly exceptional. It's one of the larger fund operations in the New York area, both in terms of portfolio size, capital base, and the operational support infrastructure. We get into it today. We're talking about a dimension that's less often discussed. How do you scale a venture firm? It's a really interesting topic for me personally, and I hope you enjoy it. So with that, here's Brad. Welcome, Brad.
Thank you. It's awesome to be here.
Okay, let's start at the top, just so people can kind of contextualize before we kind of get into it. You're co-founder, general partner of Primary Ventures, one of the predominant seed funds in New York. There you go, little promo for you. What does Primary invest in? Give us the basics.
Yeah, we are a seed stage firm, IT generalists, but hyper specialized at the individual partner level. So I've got 7 partners. Each of them is very focused on an individual sector. So that means Brian Schechter on compute and infrastructure software, Tobias Citron on cybersecurity, Emily Mann on financial services and fintech, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we cover the landscape, but not by being generalists, by being a collection of specialists and almost in some ways operating like a sort of miniature fund of funds ourselves. Each one of those partners kind of runs their own book, is a pretty independent decision maker, collaborative with each other, but pretty independent on the decision making. Seed entirely, seed, pre-seed as a point of entry. We also incubate. About 30% of our portfolio companies over the last several years are things that we have homegrown, and that's something that lines up very well with the specialization focus. So if Sam Toole, who leads healthcare for us, he'll be thinking thematically about the ideas and opportunities in healthcare that he's excited about. He'll be looking for companies that line up with that. And there will be situations, not infrequently, where he can't find a founder who's doing something that scratches the itch he's got around a market opportunity. And so in those cases, we've built infrastructure around building companies to address those things.
So you guys will start it from scratch.
We'll start from scratch.
Okay.
From zero. And we'll start from scratch. We will back a exceptional founder with like the very beginning kernel of an idea, not fully formed. We will back a 10-person team with $500,000 of revenue, but who's raising their first kind of big institutional seed round.
That's awesome.
Anywhere in there.
Why do so there's a lot of options out there, obviously. This is a vast market in seed and across all of early stage. Why do people pick Primary?
So what we have been focused on building for years now is the preeminent institutional grade seed firm. So what does that mean? That means you don't have to, most founders are thinking about, do I want to raise from a kind of boutique-y seed dedicated firm, most of which are quite small, 2 or 3 partners, most of which are relative generalists, or do I want to raise from a large multi-stage platform that does some seed, and I kind of get, they will promise me things about operational resources and their specialization around things, their access to customers. And we think that there's a kind of a Goldilocks middle path that we have built around, which is enabling you to choose a partner who's dedicated to your stage, which I think is really important. And that's the thing that founders sometimes miss, that if you raise a $5 million round from a $5 billion fund, the incentive alignment is not there. We don't believe, or it often isn't there. And if things go anything but perfectly for you, that firm is going to have a lot of incentive to stop being supportive, potentially invest in direct competitors, may have already invested in fact, Mark Andreessen just a couple of weeks ago was quite explicit about saying, like, we made a mistake by not investing in competitors as these AI markets are blowing up. And so we're going to start more broadly indexing and then double down on whoever wins. So creating internal competition. So we think there's an opportunity to bring some of the resources that a firm like that, like an Andreessen, can bring operationally to founders without having to move away from a firm who is very dedicated, entirely oriented towards the stage you're at, the challenges you're facing, that kind of 0 to, first few $1 million of revenue, that 2 or 3 people to 30 or 40 people. So we have built, we've got 60 people in our organization now. Most of them are not on the investment team. Most of them are on what we call our impact team, which has a team of, I think we're now 9 full-time recruiters, half a dozen people doing what we call market development, which is customer development and driving pipeline, customer relationships for our companies. We have strategic finance capabilities. We have some kind of marketing and branding capabilities. And so we know that it doesn't matter how talented and experienced you are as a seed stage founder, you don't have enough expertise around the table. You haven't been able to hire, with the exception of some of these like outrageous $50 million seeds now, but in the kind of any historically normal seed round, you are under-resourced. You haven't earned the right to hire the expertise yet. Certainly your brand is not on the map in a way that will attract talent and customers. And so we step in and provide a lot of resources to help you fill that gap until you can hire that stuff yourself.
Do the companies have to pay you back for those operating resources?
They do for some, specifically recruiting. We run it at a loss. Kind of philosophically, it's always been important to us that we're not going to make money off of our portfolio companies. But with recruiting, which is a very well understood, like, what's the value of a placed full stack engineer? Many companies are offering referral bonuses, et cetera, or they're paying outsourced recruiters. So we charge for the recruiting services, and it ends up being usually about like 25% of the cost of getting that done anywhere else, and generally faster. And our companies tell us almost entirely better service than they've gotten elsewhere. Nobody has to do it. Mm-hmm. We don't make anybody pay anything. We don't make anybody take any services they don't want. We just make them available. And you can fire us anytime and you can demand your money back. Nobody's ever done that.
Yeah, a lot of people, when they hear some of these more nuanced models, we have something totally different, but in a similar vein, there can be some confusion around, does it create these weird incentives? But in practice, it ends up being pretty simple. Do you find a lot of conflicts coming out of this?
Not at all. It's right. Like, I've got, I could point you to a couple founders in our portfolio right now where we've driven multiple millions of dollars of pipeline into their sales funnel. And where could this conflict in that possibly be? Most of that, much of what we do on the customer development side, you don't have to pay for. Some of which you do, but it ends up being by far the cheapest lead generation mechanism for the companies that use it, even on the pieces that you pay for.
Now, you've taken a different approach, right? When you look at these seed firms, you've described it. Most of them are pretty small teams, small capital bases. As you said, the quadrant of folks that really only do seed, getting away from the big firms where it's kind of a bit of a lead gen. When you look at those, what are the pros and cons? Obviously, there's a value narrative that probably helps you get into competitive deals for the entrepreneurs. Are there any cons to having a bigger organization? And 60-person footprint is pretty hefty for venture.
Yeah, it's. I am the day-to-day managing partner of the firm. It's a different job than being the managing partner of a 8-person firm. Like we've got HR issues. We're an operating company.
Right.
We think of ourselves like an operating company. Ben and I are co-founders of an operating company. That's how we identify. People walk off the elevator into our office and they're like, this does not feel like a venture capital firm. It feels like an there's like flat screens on the wall with metrics for our recruiting and market development teams. And it does creates a different culture. I think creates a great culture. I think it creates energy. I think it creates collaboration. We specifically focus on, we made a transition a few years ago because we had drifted and towards one of the challenges when you have an organization that becomes like 40% investment, 60% not investment. It's easy for the weight of the not investing side to start kind of driving the bus. And we were spending too much time with those resources focusing on NPS. That's sort of the obvious thing that you would measure when you start doing what are effectively professional services. And we realized that we needed to stop doing that. We needed to get that team focused on the only thing that matters when you are a venture capital firm at the end of the day, which is like MOIC, multiple of invested capital.
Right.
And so like everybody on my recruiting team now can talk about how their activities and their outcomes are driving MOIC for the partners who led the deals on the companies that they're working with. And we had to make that intentional shift. We had to go too far in the other direction and sort of lose sight a little bit of, wait, hold on. Our LPs pay us to return multiples of the capital that they invest in us.
How do you get them to prioritize that or to make even short-term decisions with that end goal in mind?
So the individual recruiter is not so much making those decisions and prioritizations themselves, but Jamie Starrett, who runs that team, is regularly communicating with the investment team about, here's where the demand for recruiting support is coming from in the portfolio.
Yeah.
Let's line that up with what are the highest leverage opportunities in the portfolio? What are the value drivers we think we need to be leaning hard into? What are the companies that we think are really interesting and with a nudge and a little more support, maybe building out the team a little more quickly, can get to that mode. And then we have to make some hard choices about like, this is a company that's not doing what we all hoped and dreamed. And sure, if we have spare resources available, we'll be supportive there. But if not, we have to pull those away.
It's interesting. We talk about 0 to 1 in the seed context all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Your firm is kind of in the 1 to 10. There's not a lot of talk about managing an operation in the context of that framework and venture. It feels like at most firms, they talk a lot about how to manage the firm when they're in the 0 to 1 phase. It's scrappy. Then a lot of VCs get stuck there and they never cross that chasm. Common
a lot of
operating
VCs,
company vernacular.
Yeah, most VCs, I think quite reasonably, just don't want to cross that chasm. I have people tell me all the time, like people whose names you would know well say to me, I wouldn't want your job.
Right.
Like I respect what you guys done. It's interesting. It's different. It's powerful. I've heard from your portfolio companies. It makes a real difference. And I wouldn't want your job.
Right. Is the argument there that the subtext, you're doing less day-to-day investing and more managing an operation?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I think the average venture capitalist, and this is in no way, shape, or form a criticism, the average venture capitalist really likes the nature of the work, which is I get to opine, support, coach, mentor, nudge, make introductions. And then I get to go home and go to sleep. And, when somebody on the team's dog died or spouse has cancer or whatever, like I'm out of the world of sort of challenging HR, drama, intercompany politics, et cetera. And we have chosen to take on enough scale that you're in
an operating
we have
role.
Dogs dying and
right.
things like that. Yeah. It's an operating company.
Yeah. And now it's you and Ben are the co-founders.
Yeah.
How do you guys divide up responsibilities in this operating company?
So one of Ben and I, us both, we're very different we're very, very similar at the kind of core values, ambition, competitiveness, like what we're trying to do and what we're trying to achieve. We're quite different in how that manifests in day-to-day life and how we lead and how we manage. And we co-managed the business. We were effectively co-CEOs we're now 10 and a half years old, for the first 5 or so years. And it was around then that we were starting to scale more seriously. We were probably 20 people or something at the time. It's actually 4.5 years ago. And he came to me and he said, we're getting big enough and this is going to be getting complicated enough that the co-CEO thing is not going to be the right answer. And you're better at a bunch of that stuff. I'm frankly not interested in a bunch of that stuff. He's been a CEO, operating company CEO. He was a founder, successful founder and CEO of a venture-backed company. And he said, you do that. And that was a remarkable, selfless gesture around, like, he didn't need to be controlling things. And when he said that, he meant it. Like and it took me a while to get used to that. He would look at me every once in a while and be like, you're the CEO, what's the call? And I was like, like, I make that decision solo that impacts you? He's like, yeah, absolutely. Okay. That was a big change from something that had been a kind of brothers in arms from the beginning. But importantly, it freed him up. I mean, he's an incredible creative, generative thinker, strategist, and it gave him the space to be very much removed from the operational details of the business and focus on kind of bigger picture thinking. So sometimes people see a co-founder move into like a chief strategy officer role, and we're all like, well, clearly that guy got shoved out and that's kind of a bullshit title and whatever. But in many ways, that is what Ben has been doing for the last several years. And he does a lot of mentorship and development of our younger investors and our other partners who are newer to being investing partners. And then in the fund that we raised earlier this year, for the first time, he really just took the ball on the fundraising and ran that.
That totally tracks too. I think to your point earlier, a lot of people don't want the job of running the operation, the HR problems and all that. People with a lot of reps like Ben know what the job is, right? They can be objective about it.
And some people like that job and some people don't. And yeah, he was smart enough to play to his strengths.
I'm going to switch gears here for a second. Why'd you become a VC?
I had been a consultant.
You were a Monitor Group guy, right?
Monitor Group guy, now Monitor Deloitte. I had not been an operator. I had thought about becoming an operator at a larger scale. I had a couple of clients who tried to get me to join the companies, and I kind of looked at the life of an operator, and there was too much sameness to it for me. I loved the variety and I loved the quality of the people that I was around in a consulting environment. But I also knew I was way too far removed from where rubber meets road in that world. You do 4 or 6 months of work, you'd like do the big presentation, and then you'd like wonder if anybody was going to do anything with it.
Yeah, maybe they implement, maybe they don't.
Yeah, and we were at a firm that like prided ourselves on like partnering around the implementation and blah blah blah. But still, it was like you were onto something else while they were implementing, and that just didn't work for me anymore. And I had a friend who had gone into venture, and it just became clear to me that this might provide that kind of perfect in-between point, lots of variety. In fact, more variety, radically more like it's Tuesday, I'm learning about X, and it's Wednesday and I'm learning about Y. But much, much closer to the metal on decisions and things. And I remember very clearly in my first 30 days in venture, I went to a meeting with the guy who was running the firm I was at the time with a portfolio company. And we spent 90 minutes with the two founders, and we walked out the door. And we were walking out the door, and I said to him, I was like, that company is going to be different tomorrow because of that conversation. Not because necessarily like wasn't like we provided all that wisdom, but we had been a part of and helped to facilitate a conversation around a real change in like the customer focus of that business. And that was like staggering to me. It was Wednesday and they were doing X, and it was Thursday and they were going to be focusing on Y. And that was like pure exhilaration to think about an environment where things could change that fast and you could be that iterative. And so it was pretty quickly rewarded the instinct I had about it.
You and I, when we met, we were both working at venture networks. And the concept was there was a series of firms that were kind of under another firm's umbrella.
Yeah.
Right. And I think there's this interesting meta story kind of in where you've gone with the business, the venture networks, et cetera, all around. How do you scale? Right. There's the VCs are the professionals who are in the market trying to create scaled businesses. But almost by design, most people are in a non-scalable model. And so VCs, knowing this kind of probably cognitive dissonance to a certain level, are sitting there looking at their own businesses, either intentionally choosing not to scale,
right,
or people have tried to creatively figure out ways to pull the levers. So in your current role, the primary construct, you've got the 7 partners, each doing their own vertical. That's a way to scale under the roof. And we were both part of different networks, and there was a couple of them at the time, where various independent legal entities with their own management teams kind of bundled together and partnered.
Quasi-franchises.
Yeah, it was like a franchise. It was closer to a franchise model.
Yeah.
Why did that not work for the universe? Because those have all gone sideways at this point.
So I think the one that I was part of took an approach that, I mean, I was a firm called Village Ventures, which worked with a bunch of very geographically focused firms that were focused on sort of second tier markets. And the reality was the whole notion of the second tier market thing was an invitation to an adverse selection game. And so the fundamental premise was wrong. The idea was that like in a post-internet world, you can build great companies anywhere. There's great talent engines around, universities and corporate R&D centers that are not in the Valley, Boston, New York, Austin, Texas. And if you could bring capital to those places, you could drive entrepreneurial innovation. That was just a flawed premise. I think that the reality is that if you can, you have to give up some economics to be in the franchise. And if you think you're a really good deal sourcer and decision maker, and that the economic trade between franchisor and franchisee or mothership and whoever's out on the edge, if you don't get that economic trade just right, the incentives to break off become quite strong. I actually think Village Ventures had started with a second tier geographically focused model that was wrong and had shifted pretty dramatically into a sector focused model in a way that was starting to become quite successful. And then the financial crisis kind of hit pause on a lot of things and kind of knocked them out of position and made it hard to kind of commit to rebuilding from that. I actually think the model that they had moved to could work over time.
Yeah, it seems like the other 3 choices are A, don't scale. The B, the one a lot of the firms have done, scale the asset base and kind of go into larger rounds or increase volume in some way. or where you've landed, where you've expanded the partnership and you've picked up a bunch of sectors.
Yeah. And I think, and the important thing about the way we've scaled, so the conventional wisdom amongst LPs, as you know, which I think is right, is that as you scale, as firms scale, returns get worse. But the important corollary to that is as firms scale their AUM per partner, it goes down. Because what happens when, let's just say it's you and me and our first fund is $75 million and we do great. And then we raise a second fund, and because we've done great, we can raise $150 million. And then by the time we're raising our third fund, our first fund looks really good and LPs love us. And they're like, yeah, you can raise $300 million. And if it's just still the two of us, and this is the most common path, or maybe you add one person. Well, we raised $300 million and we've gone from two guys investing 37.5 each to maybe three people investing 100 each. That's a different game.
Mm-hmm.
And at some level, the market has supported growth of AUM per partner to a point because round sizes are bigger, et cetera. But if your growth tracks ahead of the growth in the average round size of the stage you invest at, then performance will definitely go down because your incentives are to drift later. Your incentives are to become less price sensitive. Your incentives are to find places to put $15 million of work at a time, not find and be flexible around if the right number is 1.5 to do the 1.5. Now, as you scale, if you just scale number of partners and say, okay, two of us can invest whatever we think the right number is in the $50 to $70 million per partner. If two of us can invest $60 million each, and so that's $120 million, then why don't we get 5 partners and invest $300 million? If there's nothing to control for quality of decision-making, to quality of that incremental check writer, then performance will also go down. You have to figure out how do you maintain quality. For us, the infrastructure we built and the way it helps our partners not just support the companies that they have invested in, but find more opportunities, be more intelligent about picking, be much, much better at winning. I mean, we are so much better at winning than we used to be because we show up with a very, very differentiated value proposition. And so this business is about finding, it's about picking, it's about winning, it's about supporting, it's about exiting. And we have the infrastructure that we've built delivers on all of those things. So I know that I can hand a new partner a checkbook and she's going to be more successful on day one with us than she would have been anywhere else. But if you don't scale in an intentional way with infrastructure and a kind of a logic around the atomic unit of that individual investor, then your returns are going to get worse. And hardly anybody has tried to do it that way.
Now, if I remember right, when you guys went out to raise ended up being primary one, you went out under your prior firm's brand name. And there was a moment. Well, can you tell me what happened? How did you guys figure out you're going to rebrand and reposition the new entity?
Ben had joined me as I was kind of repositioning out of my old firm, old strategy. The simplest answer for why we were originally raising the fund under the old banner was that my largest LP in that fund said they wanted to support me in my new thing. And they said the guy, Frank McAvoy, who just retired recently, but who in many ways I owe my career to the guy, he said, he sort of whispered to me, he's like, I know you're thinking about this as a new thing, but if you let me sell it internally as just fund 3 of the old thing, that's a much easier decision for my committee. If you come as primary one, the name didn't even exist yet, I got to underwrite it a totally different way. It's going to be a steep hill to climb. I was like, fine, we'll do it under the old name. And I was like, can we
That's
change it
an easy
right
choice.
after?
Yeah.
He's like, yeah, you can just, as soon as we sign the docs and like wire the first capital call, go ahead and change. And that's, you do the flexible, scrappy, creative things you've got to do. But it was clear, it became clear that the right thing to do as Ben and I worked together more and more, as I became more convinced that he was going to be a incredibly impactful partner to me, and that we were going to have, this journey was going to be the two of us forever. It just wasn't appropriate for him to join my own thing. I wanted to put a brand new wrapper on it. And, you were there whispering in my ear about that at the time, and played no small part in some of the decisions around that.
Well, you guys did everything right and had a good outcome. Brad, you've learned a lot of stuff through this. You've taught me a lot of stuff. Can I pepper you a couple of advice questions?
Sure.
So kind of keeping in mind the new swath of VCs in the game. What's the best kept operational secret for sourcing good deals?
It changes all the time. What it takes to source the best deals today is very different than it's just the degree to which it's more competitive today than it was 10 years ago when we were in the first year of investing our first fund. It's like going from JV high school baseball to the World Series. What our partners all do, and this is something that they can more effectively do because they're focused on an individual sector, is they are very systematically tracking talent in that sector, tracking the best companies, thinking about vesting schedules for people, talking to people about who in that company is likely to start something, who would you want to back with your own money if they did, and getting to know people even before ideas necessarily exist. And if you're not playing some version of that game, if you're waiting for companies to be created, deals to get shopped, you've already lost. So
what's the best kept secret for selecting deals? A lot of pattern matching over the years. Where's the signal? This
is going to seem like so cliche, but I tell people, I've been doing this for like 25 years now. And 25 years in a row, I have elevated my understanding of the degree to which the founder is the most important thing. Mm-hmm. And it's like, everybody in this business is really smart. Everybody in this business can think about markets, can think about customers, can identify important white space and get excited about it. And it's just, when you get too excited about market opportunity and product vision and don't pay enough attention to, is the person I'm about to back and start a 6, 8, 10-year journey with, is that person like ridiculously exceptional? If you take your eye off that ball, you've lost every time. And like that's the most obvious answer. And everybody gets it wrong. I've gotten it wrong in the last few years, despite incredible conviction about it.
How do you get better at that? Are there tells that you look for in terms of what makes someone a good founder?
The thing that we've realized we need to do with all of our younger investors is that, associates and principals, and we all do it ourselves too, is you have to spend time in the presence of great. You have to keep yourself calibrated. So, when Emily and Nick, who works with her on fintech stuff, while they're looking at new fintech deals, it's also important that they be out there just networking and connecting with, Emily's really close with the founders at Ramp, and like spending time with those guys and keeping her, her bar calibrated by like the closer they look to Eric, like the better they're going to be. That calibration and constantly recalibrating is essential.
Best kept secret for securing LPs?
Most LPs value, performance is the obvious thing, but what LPs are, I think, universally quite smart about is understanding that if you're going to win, you need a differentiated strategy, and being able to articulate something that is unique, that they can hang their hat on, that they can write into the investment recommendation memo when they decide they love your performance and they love you as a person. They have to be able to answer the why you win in a hyper competitive market. And if you can't tell a story for why in a world where Andreessen and General Catalyst and First Round and us are competing for every deal that you're trying to win, if you don't have an answer for why you're going to beat us, and it doesn't have to be, I think what I spend a lot of time with younger managers and sort of helping people who are starting their firms. And the thing I emphasize with them is you don't have to do all the deals. You don't have to try to compete for everything. In fact, trying to compete for everything, give yourself the advice you would give a portfolio company. Trying to compete for all of the customer segments, really bad idea. Pick what you're good at, pick what you wanted to be known for, have an edge, define yourself by that edge, and accept that means you're not doing all sorts of things. Like when we started out for the first 5-6 years of the firm, we basically only did New York City deals. We were like, this market is going to explode. Nobody owns this market. We're going to plant a flag and declare ourselves the leaders in this market, even though we had no business doing that when we planted the flag. We earned the right to say that over time, but we systematically said no to everything in California, to everything in Boston, to everything in Austin, Texas. And that was okay because we got really good and we became known as if you want to build your company with the guys down the street who are wired into this talent market and all this other stuff, go to them. And we then got a bunch of LPs and subsequent funds who were like, New York is becoming a thing. I want to have an answer for how I'm playing New York as part of how I'm building a portfolio of managers that are kind of playing the world. And we became a very easy choice for a bunch of people that way. The other thing, by the way, very quickly, is just do what you said you were going to do. Mm-hmm. And it's amazing how often, apparently, and I talk to LPs about this all the time, they're like, we backed these guys. They said they were going to do X and they did X plus 3 or Y or something really different. Have a strategy, stick to it. They want to understand what you're doing and why.
And your word needs to mean something.
Your word needs to mean something. Exactly. They think about this as, institutional LPs want to make a 3 to forever fund commitment to you. It's not worth, our biggest LPs now have $30, $40, $50 million per fund group with us. But they're $100+ billion institutions. If they only do $40 million once, it was a total waste of time. Mm. They want to do $500 million at least over time. So they have to believe, they have to trust you on a journey that's a 15, 20-year journey, not a next 3 years.
Thank you, Brad.
My pleasure.
Huge thank you to Brad for doing the podcast today. As you can tell, the guy has a lot of wisdom to share and has been a mentor for a very long time. So very grateful for his friendship and for him taking the time to do the podcast today. So hope you enjoyed it, and we'll catch you next time.